This video is about your mama, and I will explain the photos that I'm sharing, as well as to be prompted by the words in the Mother's Memory book by Donna Green called To My Daughter or To My Son with Love. And in this case, it is to Jennifer, my daughter. The name I was born with is Lee Ruth Ward, and who I was named after. Well, I was named after my grandfather, Leroy Madison Arrington, and my aunt, we called her Aunt Sis, and her name was really Leanner. So there was the two Lees. And then the Ruth part was actually from Ruth in the Bible. And also my mother had been on a mission to Minnesota, and she had a companion named Ruth. So before I was born, she had a completely another name in mind to name me, and she had a dream that she was to name me Lee Ruth. And of course that was something sort of a new concept idea for her, but that is my name. And so knowing me, you know, I want to know what that name means. And I learned that Lee is actually for masculine persons. So I think it can remind me of the male principle of our Heavenly Parent. And Ruth reminds me of a French word, rue, R-U-E, which means the road or the way. And I always loved the story of Ruth in the Bible, because she was a dedicated woman whose time on that road less traveled has been remembered for over 3,000 years. And Ward is an Anglo-Saxon name, which means to keep safe, to watch, or guard. And Tiao doesn't really have an exact meaning in Chinese, but since Tiao is spelled T-I-A-O in Mandarin, and the same word is a measure for roads, I like to think it is a compliment to my Ruth, the way. And Tiao also means clever, and the highest mountain is called by the name, the same sound, but a different character. And of course, your daddy, he always loved to talk about Mount Everest, which is the highest mountain on our world, I think. And then the name I was called as a child was simply Lee Ruth. And my birthday was January 19th, 1932, and my birthplace was Declo, Idaho. This is the house that we lived in, our little farm home. My father had built it with the help of his brothers, and it was very simple. And there's the painting that I did of it. For some reason, we never took a picture of it, and we didn't often take pictures, actually. So that's our farm home. And you know how when you're little, everything seems big, and grown-ups tower over you, and you just have to stretch your neck to look up. Well, I remember wondering what was on top of the refrigerator, thinking, well, someday I'll be tall enough to find out what's up there. But I knew I was little, so I could never understand why my mother's family and friends would always greet me with, "Oh my goodness, how big you are." And then I had a cousin, Ernest, my Aunt Sis's son. He used to come, when he came to see us, while he had a camera, and he would say to me, "How big are you?" And I'd put my hands up over my head and say, "So big." And so that's a picture of that. And there I am holding my sister Elaine. And that prompts me to tell you my earliest recollection. My sister Elaine was born when I was 28 months old. The doctor was there to deliver her in the bedroom. And by the way, I was born in the bedroom also. And afterwards, I remember, even though I was so little, that he handed the baby to my Aunt Sis and Ruth Green, who was there to help my mother. And I remember them taking the crying baby into the kitchen and washing her off. The next prompt I have from the memory book is the story about me told most often. It was for sure. It was about the time I walked over a mile to my Uncle Moroni's home because I wanted my sister Arlene to come back home. Now, Arlene was 14 years older than I. I just adored her. She was so fun, and she played the piano, and she laughed a lot, and she was just a delight to be around. And so I can't remember really walking there, but I walked down the canal bank and went clear there to Uncle Moroni's home, and she answered the door, and she was so shocked when she saw me standing there in front of the door, and she couldn't see Papa. He was no place in sight. And so, of course, when my mother found out I'd done that, it was a really big worry for everybody. I always liked this doll because it was about like this. This is, of course, not the picture of it, but it had sort of a china head, and then it had a pink dress on. And that's the closest picture I could get to it. But I think the legs and the hands and the face were china, but the rest was a soft body. And it was maybe about 16 inches tall, but I really liked that doll. And then here's a painting that Donna Green did that's so cute of a little girl having her little tea set to have with her dolls. It's so cute. About Christmas and how that was a wonderful time when we had Christmas, and we would have our tree decorated, and then my mother would make vanilla pudding. I think she made it in round pineapple juice cans, and then would have this vanilla sauce on it. But that'd be for Christmas Eve. It was very delicious. And then my warmest childhood memory. I remember waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning and going out into the cold winter night on the tree to look for the Star of Bethlehem, and then sitting around the Christmas tree and seeing all the presents under the tree. It was an awesome giving and getting experience, which was filled with love. And my parents would make their gifts that they gave us. For example, one year they made sewing baskets for both Elaine and I. And one year, I just can hardly believe, this was when we were in Logan, that my father made an art desk for me out of plywood. And he had been making it downstairs in our basement. And so I didn't know he was doing that. And, it was just like it covered one whole wall in the bedroom, and had a slanted board for drawing or painting, and drawers big enough to hold the paper. And it was an amazing desk that he made me. That was really something how he did that. And so Christmas was always really wonderful. And we also did the Santa Claus story, because my father would ring bells outside and we'd say, "Oh, there's Santa, he's coming, we've got to go to bed." And we'd write a note for Santa and leave him cookies, and we'd listen for, Santa to come, and then we'd go to sleep, and of course our parents would fix all the presents and wrap them, put them under the tree. They really made a big event out of Christmas. It was really nice. And the other thing was my father would sit in. He used to work with his brother in an upholstery shop. So he had a couch that he had made and a chair. It was made out of mohair. That's what it was called. And it was brown. And he would sit in that chair and read from the Deseret News. Was a church newspaper that we would get. And they'd always have a Christmas story. And so he would read us the Christmas story, and we'd sit on the floor around his chair and hear it, And then it was after that my mother would make the service, the steamed pudding with the vanilla sauce on it. And so Christmas was really a wonderful time. And then usually on Christmas, some of the other relatives would come, and they'd make the ice cream in the ice cream maker. So it was pretty special. I want to tell you some things that were really different from your day, and that is that we had, in the beginning, we did not have electricity. We had lanterns. Now, here's a picture of one. I don't think it's exactly like how ours was, but we would have, kerosene lanterns, and then also a stove. This is a dreadful picture of a stove, but it's the only one I could find of coal, where you put coal inside and burn it. But we had a stove, but it didn't look that terrible. And in the beginning, and then later on we got electricity. And then also I remember my mother making cornbread, and also they would make real ice cream in an ice cream maker. And when we had the telephone, this would be on the wall, and we'd hear a voice saying, I guess she'd say, "Number, please," and then we'd tell her who we were going to call. And so I remember that having that phone. And then our car, I'm sure our car didn't look this good, but it had a crank, and this said there's a picture of a car with a crank on it. But we did have an old car that had a crank on it eventually. And this is where we lived, and this is, we called it the canal bank, because can you see there's water on the left, and my father helped dig those canals when he first went to Declo, because it's called homesteading. So he had to do all these things to prepare the land so that then he could receive a parcel of land. So they would fill the canals with water, and then everyone could use this at a certain time. They could have water to irrigate their farm. And all those trees are called poplar trees. And this is another view of our home. And a man by the name of Cobley owned that property, and we would walk through that to, like where we are with the camera. We would walk through there. There was sort of a trail that we walked on, and then there was 40 acres of land that my father owned down on this road. And our town, this is Declo, Idaho, back in the 1920s. And you'd see those cars. That's how probably our car looked. And it was just a few stores, and it was like a post office. And I think well, I know there was a pool hall, which is what we called it, and it was a very smelly, dark place. And then as you go down further, we had our church. But actually, I remember there was trees around it, and it didn't look so barren like this. But I couldn't find a picture of it. But this is definitely the way, this is a picture of our church. But it must be after they just built it. So we would walk up those steps, and then down below was the classrooms. And this is not our school was called Declo Public School, and it went from first grade to 12th grade. But it was sort of like this. But I found this, it was a picture of another school in Idaho. But I thought, okay, it's sort of close to it. Probably didn't look this good, but it was something like this. How I got to school when I was little. Well, I walked down a canal bank, usually with my sister and my brother in the early years. This was about a half-mile walk, and then we crossed the road and waited by the mailboxes for a school bus to pick us up and drive us to school. I went to first grade, and my teacher was Miss Fellows, and I like to draw, as you know, and paint from the time I was about 5 years old when my mother took me to an art exhibit, and I just looked at those beautiful paintings on the wall and thought, I want to be an artist. And so I was always drawing everything. But the teacher let me draw something, and I decided to draw a deer. And then she entered it into the county fair, and I think I won a prize for this little drawing. And then, as you maybe know, but I'll say it to you, when I was about 6 or I think it was about 7, my father went to see a man about helping doing re-roofing our house, and he took me with him. And when we were in the house, I saw that the woman was an artist. I was so impressed, and so I begged my parents to let me take lessons from her. I think they lived right sort of near the church, so after primary, which we had on, I can't remember whether it was Tuesday or what day, and then I would go to her place and have an art lesson. And first she started me out doing monochromatic things, teaching me how to use the brush and all kind of things. But eventually, then she had me copy some of her paintings of, like the Dutch artists. And so these were some of the copies that I did, and I'm sure she did parts on it too. This one was poinsettias, and then here I'm doing it just on my own. There's a house across from where we lived, and I guess it was on a snowy night, and so that's one of the paintings. And here's like mountains, and I do a drawing of my sister. I called it Elaine Doodling. She's sitting by that, I think it was a Zenith radio, listening to something, and then while she's doing it, she's writing, but how's that twist of that right arm? My favorite bedtime story. I remember that. I loved my mother to tell me the story of Hazel and Joseph and the guardian angel. I had that painting on my wall, and Mother had composed a very touching and sweet story about the children gathering flowers for their father's homecoming and how they stayed after dark and then just prayed for help to cross the stream and return home, and the angel came to help them. And this is a poem in my childhood that my mother used to say. Who loved best? "I love you, Mother," said Little John. Then, forgetting his work, his cap went on, and he was out to the garden swing, leaving his mother the wood to bring. "I love you, Mother," said little Nell. "I love you more than tongue can tell." Then she teased and pouted half the day, till Mother rejoiced when she went to play. "I love you, Mother," said little Fan. "Today I'll help you all I can." To the cradle then she did softly creep, and rocked the baby till it fell asleep. Then stepped softly, she took the broom, and swept the floor and dusted the room. Busy and happy all day was she, helpful and cheerful as a child could be. "I love you, Mother," again they said, 3 little children going to bed. And how do you think the mother guessed which of them really loved her best? So you can see that was a very teaching moment poem. She wanted us to be like little Fan. And I'll say a little bit about collecting. I started out collecting milk nickel sticks to put in my brother and sisters and my clubhouse that was in the orchard. And those sticks were our treasures, along with special pop bottle caps. I collected leaves and pressed them in a catalog and wrote down the name of the leaf on the page. And I collected insects for a while when someone gave us some they had collected. I didn't really enjoy that one. And I collected stamps and coins for a little while. I collected pictures of artists and musicians and lots of pictures of Jesus, and made scrapbooks with all the pictures. And then things that you'd be surprised at, this was not me, of course, but that I knew how to milk cows when I think I was about 10, when my brothers and my father started teaching me about milking cows. And we would sit on actually it was a one-legged stool, but we would balance on that. Oh my goodness. And we would milk the cow. And they'd have hobbles around their back 2 legs so they wouldn't kick. And then their head would be in I've forgotten the name of what that is, where their head is in there, but they would be held in place in a sense, right? And then this another thing is that I would be on top of the wagon, and this of course isn't me, but I would be on the wagon as my brothers would put the hay, the alfalfa up on the wagon, and then my job was to tromp it down, and then we would go and they would put it onto the haystack. So those are sort of unusual things, yeah. I would like to tell you about how I used to ride a horse during the last 2 years that we lived on the farm. As I remember, my brother Newell taught me to ride the horse, and he would put the bridle on, and then I would put the horse over by a fence. I would climb up on the fence and then, be able to get myself up onto the horse. And I remember riding with him when he would take the cows out to what we call the pasture area, which was past our barns, and we'd go down the canal bank away and then go into a area where there was grass and things, for the cows to graze on. So I went with my brother a few times so that I knew how to do it. And then when he was drafted into the war in Germany, then I started riding the horse and taking the cows out to the pasture myself. And I can hardly believe I did that when I was a little girl. But the cows would be in front, and I'd be on the horse behind, and it would be just like they knew they were supposed to go someplace, and we'd keep them going. And so the horse that I rode was named Old Fox, and he was the color of a fox, and then they put the OLE on the front of it. And but he was tame, and the other horses were horses that were in a team that would pull the wagons and pull the machinery. So Old Fox was the one that I rode. And I know, see, that was when I was between 10 and 12. And I know I'd never ridden a horse from that time until I think it was about 1990, wasn't it? When after Daddy had died, we were invited to go to Kauai by his cousins. And then I remember we all got to ride a horse. I think probably you did too. But here's a picture of Mom riding the horse at that time. Now here's how the canal looked when my father and all the people in that area, the men were digging it. I just can't believe how they dug this big canal. And but this is an actual picture of when they were doing it. And sometimes when Elaine and I would come home, like in the wintertime, there was no water down there except just little pools of water where you might see little fishes or little something, minnows running around in it. But sometimes we would climb down. That picture looks like that'd be dangerous going down, but somehow we could. And then we'd walk down in the canal sometimes when there was no water, And then here's a look at some of the dresses that women would buy in the 1930s. And this is just almost a very simple one. I know you like fashion. And then there's Charlie Chaplin. And we had a cultural hall next to the church. I couldn't find a picture of it. But we would, everyone would go there there'd be movie nights, there'd be dancing, there'd be, actually I don't know if they did sports, but they perhaps did. And but I know I would go there and we'd go and we'd see these movies. And I remember that and seeing The Perils of Pauline. And I remember seeing The Shepherd of the Hills. I think we went to Burley to see that movie. That was really good. And we also went to see Bambi. And so those are some of the things that happened when I was, before I was 12. And then my father was having kidney problems, and the horse had kicked him in the back, and so one of his kidneys was not working. And now that's the way I understand it. So he was having a lot of pain, and so he decided to rent the farm, and we moved to Logan, Utah. And this is a house we lived in, 171 South 3rd West. That's Elaine and myself on the porch steps. And so that was, maybe we'll say a bigger house than the other one we had. It was maybe we'd say it's better in some ways. And so that was the house we lived in. And then this is Main Street in Logan, Utah. And then these are some paintings that I did later on of Main Street in Logan, Utah. And but I remember it was so nice on Christmas time that we would try to get it. Well, this is a picture, it says, of Logan, Utah, but I remember that across the street was, they had the steak center, called it the Steak Tabernacle, across the street from Main Street. And it was really beautiful. and you'd hear music, Christmas music from there, and then all the streets would be decorated with Christmas lights, and I couldn't find pictures of it real good, but anyway, it was really a good memory of mine to walk down Main Street during the Christmas season, and the temple, and it was Logan Temple is on a hill, and then everything covered with snow. It was so beautiful. And then mentioning the temple, why it reminded me that one time they had a contest. They decided to light the temple and have many lights, floodlights to go on at night. And so then they had a contest if whoever could guess how many lights that they could be able to win something. And so in a way it was like my father he was telling me how many he thought it was, and anyway I won. And guess what my prize was? That I could go to the movie. I had a free pass for the whole month, and I went to see National Velvet with Elizabeth Taylor. Oh my goodness, I'd go every day to see that. I'd be like probably about 16 when I did that, yeah. And so I just felt so special. I'd go see, and Elizabeth Taylor was my age, so that was sort of neat. And then this is inside our ward. We went to the first ward, and this is how the inside looked. I mean, actually, it looks really nice, I think. Looks quite, and look at the high ceiling and everything. And then this is from the back. And see, we had a top layer there where I remember, it really looks amazingly big to me now to see it. But what was interesting was that my father, he was the custodian. And so on Saturdays, he'd have Elaine and I go and help clean. And so we'd have to dust. I remember going up to the balcony one and cleaning all the seats off and wiping them down and vacuuming. But I just remember cleaning. And so that was our ward. And then I'm going to tell you about school. I'll just show you 2 or 3 of them, but from elementary school, I'll show you some of one of that. And this is in high school. Looks sort of strange because it's a newspaper. And but you can see your mama there on the back row. And I was in the student council, I guess, something like that. And then this is when I graduated from Logan High School. And this part of the memory book is titled Love Conquers All. And I'm going to tell you how I met your father. I first remember seeing Daddy in the walking across campus at BYU Provo, where I had gone after I graduated from high school. And I did a double take. As I looked at him, I thought he was so handsome. I'd just never seen an Oriental, that's what word I would have used, that was so tall and with such a handsome build. Well, we never dated. He was going with a girl, I found out later, he was going with a girl named Sue, and I was dating a fellow named Al. Well, in 1953, I transferred to Utah State Agricultural College. Later it was called USU, and I got a job in the housing office. Well, students would come in to get a housing list from my desk. One day, in walks this handsome young man in an Air Force ROTC uniform. He looked at me and he said, "BYU?" Sort of like, "Is that where I saw you?" And I said, "Yes." And he asked, "Are you married?" I said, "No." "Are you married?" He said, "No." "Let's go have lunch." And we went to the Bluebird Cafe, which they had on campus, and we saw each other all the time after that. And then the question is, what attracted me to him? Well, I think I was attracted to Daddy's differences from me. After all, I'm an artist, and it takes a full palette of different colors to create something beautiful, and harmonizing variety is how one gets beauty. I could never guess what he would say next. I was just actually bored with all the young men that I grew up with in that area, where I knew what they would say before they said it. And recollections of our courtship. Well, we started going together right away. Daddy would come to pick me up after my ceramic class in the evening and walk me home, or would take the bus part way. He lived in a hotel, so he had to eat out all the time, so I would go with him to eat, and he would talk, and he would share his different points of view about almost everything. And the next question is the proposal. I think Daddy said something like, "Let's get married," very much to the point. Okay, now I'm going to tell you about my wedding. Well, we were married for time in Los Angeles, California. And I wasn't too happy about how we got married. But so I cried afterwards. And he put his arm around me and we walked to the car, and he said, "Let's just forget we got married like that." Because frankly, we were married by a judge at City Hall, I guess. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you about is our marriage and sealing in the Hawaii Temple. And that took place on December 17th, 1966. And I wore a beautiful, straight, long dress, which I made from material given me by a sister in our ward, actually Sister Lydia Spencer, who was Palmer Spencer's mother. And I felt beautiful and so very happy that Daddy had prepared himself to come to the temple. And so we took you 5 children, Winston and you and Jeffrey and Warren and Jackie. She was just, 2 years old, I think. And so after you were all, they brought you in to be sealed to us, and it was just really wonderful. It was very tender and sweet. You all had on white clothes, and you can see in this picture how beautiful it was. And afterwards, we went to have lunch at my friend Delsa Olson. Her husband was the dean of students, and Delsa was a really good friend of mine. We shared a lot of things together. And so she made a nice lunch in their backyard for us, and it was really beautiful. And so then Hiva and Ui, they were born under the covenant, because we made a covenant that day that we loved each other and wanted to be together for time and all eternity. As I look back on my life, many things that I've done are memorable and beautiful. Places I have gone, people I've met, books I have read, various things I've done in my effort to try to fulfill my purpose in life. But of all the experiences that have been mine, none do I look back on with more joy than that of motherhood. Having a good mother really gave me a head start in the education that life gives us. But being a mother, I have found, stimulates even more growth. Motherhood requires that I develop those virtues I most wanted, but didn't know quite how to gain, like unselfishness and greater service and unconditional love developed by patience, tolerance, and forbearance. I'm grateful that I had a mother, a good one, but even more, I'm grateful to have been a mother. And I wrote this about what I learned about boys and men that I'd like you to know. Let's see if I still agree. I learned that males and females are two different versions of human beings and that we think differently in many ways. Males and females are different even in their viewpoints and life reactions. I think it is hard for us to really understand each other, and like the song in My Fair Lady, we often wish they would think like we do. I've concluded that we are complementary to each other, for we are dependent on each other to produce children, have families, and have all the experiences that Heavenly Father wants us to have. We encourage each other, assist each other, and need each other, but we have to work at getting along and understanding each other. We have to make lots of adjustments to their differences. We have to nurture our relationship like a farmer does his garden. We have to give of our time and always remember that time equals love. You know what I mean? What you love, you give your time to. The more I did for your daddy, the more I loved him. And I matured that love when I learned to celebrate your daddy's differences from myself. I think I still agree with that. That's pretty good. My dear daughter Jennifer, I have made this video not to tell you my whole life history, but to tell you about my early life living on a farm in Idaho, and then my 6 years living in Logan, Utah, and how I met your daddy and became a wife and a mother. The more we understand each other, the more we'll love each other, and I want you to know that I have loved you while you were developing inside me from the instant I saw you and held you in my arms. It is like an instant bond that never ends. I know you've gone through many adversities in your life, even as I did, and I've been proud of you that you have gradually moved towards the light and overcame many things. Yes, we both have more things to overcome, but constantly know that somehow things will work out and good will come of everything that happens in our life. I read a quote that I think is very significant. Difficulties must be met and obstacles must be encountered as a part of the experience training for our growth and development in Father's plan for us of progressive perfection. End of quote. Just know that Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, have sent their Spirit to be with us and to help us to overcome all our obstacles. But we must ask for their help, because free agency is very important in the universe. And so always ask and be assured that sooner or later you will get answers and will see the problems are working out to be better and then better and better. And also Patience is one of the big things we struggle with as we want instant help, instant answers, instant growth, especially instant change in other people. And sometimes we lose our faith because we think we're not being helped as we desire. I know because I've gone through those times of impatience, particularly with Heva's illness. But remind yourself, as I do, that patience is the evidence of love. And if we truly love someone, then we will have patience during their recovery and growth process. We must keep loving the person we want to change and grow spiritually. Our love for them must be evident as they see us being of service to them, in spite of them not deserving our service or in spite of their resistance to our love. I love you, my dear Jennifer. You were our firstborn daughter, and Daddy and I were so thrilled to have a daughter. I look back and I do regret that I wasn't a better mother and I didn't handle some of the crisis situations we had in a better way. I suppose we all do the best we can and then pray that our child will be strong enough to fly on their own after our beginning 18 years with them. I have so many good memories of you from the time you were a baby and a little child, and then a young, energetic girl and a determined young woman. It has been a joy for me to see you marry an imperfect man and have imperfect sons, as that's the way we all are, imperfect, struggling mortals. Daddy and I were imperfect and had 7 imperfect children, and that was a joy to me. And how thrilling it was to have you return to activity in the church and even prepare and go to the temple to receive your spiritual gift, the endowment. No, that doesn't make you or I perfect, but it shows that we love Heavenly Father and we want to follow His plan and be resurrected and have life after this life. It's a perfect way to let Heavenly Father know we love Him and recognize that He's given us His Spirit to be with us, to represent Father to us, so we can feel close constantly to Father and to His Creator's Son, Jesus. Again, I say I love you, my dear daughter, Jennifer, and I hope you will enjoy hearing my voice telling you about your Grandma Callie, about the days of my youth and of meeting Daddy, and then how men and women are complementary to each other and how we need each other. Then I hope you'll enjoy the video of your growth as my daughter. Love you always and forever. Your mama, your mom, your mother.